So, in case you guys were wondering, I am completely normal about the new Superman movie. Just kidding. I have been irrevocably changed by this movie, and I literally have not been able to think about anything else since. I'm finally making a video to just talk about it. Okay, so some background information. I honestly don't remember what I have and haven't talked about on this channel, and that is mainly because I have a habit of drafting a lot of scripts and then never doing anything with them. I know it might sound crazy because if you look at my uploading schedule, you'll see that it's abysmal, but I actually have like so many scripts that just never have seen the light of day. I don't know whether or not I've talked about this on this channel before, but I am obsessed with comic books and superheroes, DC Comics in particular. I tend not to talk about it that often just because it's perhaps where I feel the most vulnerable.
I wear anime and K-pop like armor so that no one can see that my true heart is DC Comics.
Also, I've always been justifiably a little scared to be a young girl in a male dominated fandom, so that's also a big contributor to that. However, I am such a big comic book fan. I would actually say that comic books are my first and number one love. Like, if I had to choose how to define myself as a fan, I would put myself in the comic book fandom. It has actually been the fandom that I have been a part of the longest, and it is the one I am currently the most active in still. I got really into superheroes when I was little, and like ever since, it's just kind of been there in the background of my life. For example, and this is kind of a tangent, so please stick with me, but I recently got back into contact with my middle school best friend. We were really close in elementary school and middle school, and we saw each other through the darkest times. Like, we literally used to cosplay together. However, after middle school, we kind of naturally drifted apart, but just this year, I reached back out to her and I asked to meet up for a coffee. And when we met up, do you know what she asked me? She literally said, "Are you still into that comic book thing?" The answer is yes, by the way. I think that this does a good job at illustrating just how deep in the sauce I've always been. Did you know that my first ever fan account was a Nightwing account? I feel like that's probably a fun fact that I've mentioned before, definitely. Comic books really mean so much to me. I am about to get really vulnerable here, so sorry for the incoming trauma dump. But when I was younger, I had pretty bad maladaptive daydreaming, and it's basically exactly what it sounds like. It was my coping mechanism to escape from reality. It was pretty severe. I've struggled a lot with depression, especially around my early teen years. I essentially hated my life. So my way of staying like even semi operational was just to check the fuck out. If you pretend like you're living a different life, you live in delusion. And delusion's such a nice place to live. I don't know how to put it into words, but my internal world was just so real. It became even more real to me than like the real world itself. You know what I mean? I don't know if I'm explaining this right. Remember shifting when like shifting was a thing in 2020 on TikTok? It was kind of like that, but less weird. I will say that it was less weird than shifting because I didn't think I actually traveled to a different universe. Like, I fully knew that it was all in my head, but I also like couldn't get out of it, right? Like, it was like I just could not escape my brain. I was experiencing my entire life through a lens. I don't know if any of this is making sense, but like for the people who get it, they get it. I know it sounds really stupid when I'm saying it out loud, but just know that like it was very real for me. There were also other side effects, like I really had a bad perception of time. It was just like something that I couldn't control. I also like could be actively having a conversation, but I was only there physically. Like I couldn't really like be in the moment too often. I also had really bad insomnia. I did not sleep at night because I didn't have any sense of time. And I was just kind of lost in a daydream the whole time. I am now more functional. I don't need to use these crutches. I do enjoy real life now, which is good. Woo, yay! I won't lie, I do miss it. I miss the worlds that I created. It's definitely something that I look back on half fondly, half not fondly. After all of this, you might be wondering, Malia, why are you trauma dumping? I did bring it up because this is relevant when explaining why comic books mean so much to me. As you might have guessed, my mental world was one of superheroes. My world revolved completely around comic book characters. The idea of being a superhero was so exactly like what I needed at that time in my life. I think ultimately I needed to believe that I could be something bigger than myself. I really liked the secret identity aspect of superheroes. When people looked at me but couldn't see the real me, I felt like I had control, like who I was inside was a superhero persona, but I was choosing to only show people my normal civilian identity. I think there's also something so aspirational about superheroes. Like, even as an adult, still, I wish I could just like save the day and fix the world. Sadly, you do eventually grow up and realize that true evil and bad guys aren't like cartoonishly monstrous villains that you can just defeat by punching the evil out of. However, don't let 10-year-old me know that, okay? Now, I do quickly want to address slash reiterate that I am primarily a DC fan. I personally just never got into Marvel. I'm sorry. I don't really know what in particular drew me to DC more. It just really stuck with me in a way that Marvel didn't. And I don't mean to turn this into like a Marvel or DC thing, but I just wanted to put that out there in case anyone was curious or in case people wanted to talk to me about anything Marvel related. I just wanted to let you know that like the only thing I could hold a Marvel conversation about would be specifically X-Men Evolution. If you want me to talk about how Scott Summers in season 1 of X-Men Evolution is my favorite version of him, that's all you can get from me. I remember watching Justice League, the animated series, and Justice League Unlimited on Netflix when I was like 10. It truly altered the course of my life. I know this sounds like a hyperbole, it's not. What really stuck with me from this series was how it dealt with the idea of power and what it means to do the right thing and that like all the nuances that come along with that. It talks about how power corrupts people and that just because someone has power doesn't mean they're a good person. It also shows you how good people can easily become bad. The stories were emotional and the characters were lovable. I recently rewatched this series and I want to say that it does still hold up. Also, I just had to mention this, but I started shipping Superman and Batman so fast. Yes, this ship developed for me when I was 10 years old, and it has been very ingrained in me. They are just like so flirty in this show. Don't even get me started. Oh my gosh. If you have watched this channel at all, I can tell you for a fact that I am shamelessly, unironically a Superbat shipper. And like it's now become almost an inside joke with myself every time I mention it on this channel. So I just wanted to mention it here since we're talking about Superman. Speaking of Superman and Batman, but mainly Superman, let's finally talk about the movie, Superman. Now, where do I even begin? To start, I do want to say that I am not a movie buff or anything, so I'm not really here to talk about the lighting or the cinematography. So I'm sorry if somehow you've made it this far into the video and thought that that was what we're going to be discussing today. I'm just here to give my biased fan perspective and talk about how much this movie meant to me personally. Okay, so I'm just gonna go ahead and say it. DC has not had the best history with Superman movies within the past recent years. I'm not gonna get into it because I feel like there are a lot more qualified people that can put it a lot more eloquently than I can. But yeah, overall, I don't think the Superman movies of the 2010s really did so great. I also feel like there was a time very recently where being a Superman fan was lame. Like, I remember when the Marvel movies first really started taking off, and I couldn't even say that I was a DC fan without the risk of being attacked. So not only was the MCU more popular, but I think people started to think of Superman as just boring. For example, when I first started dating my boyfriend, naturally I started to talk about my favorite DC superheroes. Somehow we got into the topic of Superman, and my boyfriend said that he thought Superman was boring. Chat, I cannot explain to you the totally irrational urge I felt to end the relationship right then and there. However, instead of cutting my losses, I decided that I would try to fix him and change his opinion on Superman. However, at the same time, I can't really blame anyone for having these opinions. Once I look past my own bias, I can definitely understand why some people may think that Superman is boring. To my understanding, the general sentiment that these people hold is that Superman is too overpowered, and because of that, he's very one dimensional. Obviously, This is not what Superman is. Superman is so much more than that. I think the problem was just that, sadly, it had been a while since there was a good piece of Superman media that reached the general public. There's literally always been so much potential with the story of Superman, and he's honestly such a complex and deep character. First of all, he's an alien. Obviously, in this case, he's actually from outer space, but it's also quite literally such a perfect on the nose metaphor for like xenophobia. So many people don't trust him just because he's from a different place. Like like open your eyes, guys. A lot of his stories are just about him never really fitting in. He has to deal with balancing the two sides of him. He's both an alien from Krypton and a farm boy from Kansas. But like they're not different because they're all him. He's literally intersectionality. I don't know if the grammar makes sense, but I'm just going to say the word intersectionality and Superman, and I hope you guys get what I'm trying to say. I don't know about you, but as an Asian living literally in the Midwest farmland, I could not relate to anything more. Also, he's adopted. I'm literally adopted. I'm realizing right now how much of a lore drop this video is going to be about myself, so hello. But yeah, Superman is a human story. In fact, he is my story. As I was making this video, I think I was like, oh my gosh, I am Superman. But, anyways, I am adopted. I live in the Midwest. Sometimes I feel like I'm the only non Caucasian within a 50-mile radius. My grandparents own a farm. I'm basically real life role playing as Clark Kent, guys. Anyways, back to adoption. I will not lie, I normally hate the way adoption is portrayed in most media. I feel like the majority of books or shows or movies that deal with adoption always portray it as something negative or like it's a mistake that people make. It's like something that people always like regret or like wish wasn't a fact. I feel like 99% of the time, the person who is adopted always feels like they don't belong and they yearn to meet their biological parents. And when they reunite with their biological parents, it's a happy ending and all is good. And while sure that can be the case for some people who are adopted, I'm just really tired of that being the only story about adoption. I personally love my family, and my family loves me. It's really hard to explain to people who don't have any firsthand experience with adoption, but the fact that I'm not blood related, it doesn't process. It's not on the forefront of our minds all the time. Another pet peeve that I have is when I was little, I can't tell you the amount of people who would come up and ask me if I ever wanted to meet my real parents. By real parents, they obviously mean my biological parents, but nonetheless, I always hated this question. It's such an awful question to ask. I personally have never had any desire to meet my biological parents. I think I would like to know their medical history, but that's mainly for practical reasons. Like that's kind of the only info I really need about them. Fun fact about me, I was left on the steps of an orphanage when I was 2 days old. So, I don't mean to sound callous when I say this, but they don't really mean a lot to me. Like, I genuinely don't have any connection with them. They're also not my real parents. My real parents are the people who bottle fed me, who bathed me, who read stories to me and sang songs to me. My real parents are the people who went to all my school plays and cheered me on in my competitions and still will feed me and change the oil in my car for me. Like that's my real parents. It's the people who raise you. Now, again, I know that this isn't everyone's experience with adoption. There are a lot of people who are adopted who did have meaningful relationships with their biological parents, or maybe they just didn't get that lucky whenever they got adopted. Like, I'm sure that there are people who the typical adoption story does hold truth. And I think that's 100% fine. But again, I'm just really tired of that being like the only way that adoption is portrayed in media. I think it does undermine the idea that family are the people who raise you and not just the people who share your DNA. And so back to Superman. What's so great about Superman is that he does love his adoptive parents. Like those are his real parents, right? Like he says Ma and Pa, and like it's his family back in Kansas. And while his Kryptonian parents are mentioned, it never diminishes the importance of his relationships with his adoptive parents. I think the movie did a really great job at portraying this. And let me tell you, when Paul sat down with Clark on his porch to tell him this, man, was I sobbing in the theaters. Also, Lex Luthor being his main bad guy is literally him hating capitalism. So, like, that's a big W for Superman in my book. Superman is really just like so inspiring because even though he has so much power, he still chooses to do good, which is like such an important message. Like, we all have to make an active choice to do good and try to protect individuals and like care about people on an individual level. And like, yeah, I know I'm a little late on releasing this video. I don't even know if Superman is still in theaters anymore. But, I gotta put this out there. If you have not watched the Superman movie, please, please, please go watch it. If you have watched the Superman movie, please go rewatch it. And also, comment below what you thought about it. Hopefully, with this amazing movie, people can wake up and see that Superman is not boring. His stories are deeply human and real and relatable. Always remember that being kind is punk rock. And you know what's also punk rock? Liking and subscribing to this channel. I don't know if I should even keep that in. That was pretty rough. That was pretty rough, guys. Anyways, see you guys next time, or maybe not. Bye. The movie was so good. I genuinely, I can't get over how good it was. Like, I'll never recover. I'm never gonna recover.